It was always about the cars with my dad, BMWs specifically. Coupes were his passion. My dad taught me how to drive a stick. He taught me how to go slowly over bumps and into driveways and to be critical of other drivers and not to tailgate. My earliest memory of my dad and a car is the day that our family drove down to pick up his new car. We lived at that time just north of San Francisco in Mill Valley. And I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, I was 5 years old, but I believe we drove all the way down to San Luis Obispo to get this car. And it was a silver 3-liter coupe, gorgeous, navy blue interior with some wood trim. And to me, that's always been my favorite car. I love driving that car, and it had a vintage feel to it. He treasured that car, worked on it all the time. One summer, because my dad was in education at that time in his career, so he had summers off, he decided to rebuild the engine. And I remember all the engine parts on the garage floor, and that he'd be out there for hours every day, the entire day into the evening. Truly loved that car. We always had to take the long way when we went anywhere. Mountain roads were his preferred. No need to take the freeway when you can take a mountain road. My sister and I were squished in the back seat of that coupe for a lot of our childhood. I remember getting car sick a lot.
When Alec asked me to say something about Steve, one of the things, or probably the most dominant thing that came to my mind, was the friendship that Steve and I had. A lot of people don't know it, but Steve and my friendship preceded the time that we both had 8 Series cars. Back in the early 90s, I was in charge of the CS registry, and this was before emails or text messages or anything like that. And Steve had an E9. So, we used to do written newsletters and letters and phone calls, and that was my first contact with Steve. Well, fast forward, and Steve ended up getting his 8 and putting on the West Coast 8 Fest in 2003. And our friendship and contact with each other grew as I got my first 8 Series in 2004. Occasionally Steve and I would call and we would talk, and in 2007 my wife and I decided to put on the Southeast 8 gathering here in Florida, and I relied heavily on Steve's knowledge because he had done the West Coast 8 Fest. Steve and I would call and we would talk about things, and he would help me with ideas, and we ended up having a great event. But through that, we started calling and talking on a more frequent basis. And it got to the point where we were talking probably at least every other week, and sometimes every week. Steve would tell me about things going on and with his car. And one of the things that impacted me, or made me think about Steve, was he was really a true enthusiast. He really enjoyed his 850. Of course, then he transformed it and made it into an 860, and then drove it. I remember there was one of the magazines, and they did a review of Steve's 860, and they said the car has a natural patina. And I think that's really true. And they went on to describe it that the car was enjoyed and utilized. And I think that added to their impression of the patina of Steve's car. As time went on, Steve and I would continue to talk more and more often. And Steve floated the idea of having a 10th annual event of the original Left Coast 8 Fest, and that was scheduled for 2013. So we planned on attending the event, coinciding that with a business trip that I had to make out there. And my friendship with Steve, like I said, was pretty frequent over the phone, but we had never met in person in probably the 15 years that we'd corresponded. And I remember when Marcia and I pulled into the parking lot of the Left Coast 8 Fest, and Steve was at the check-in table. Got out of the truck, and I went to shake his hand and formally introduced myself face to face. And you know what Steve did? He gave me a big hug and said, "Roger, it's really, really glad to meet you in person." And I felt the same way. So as time went on, you know, Steve and I would talk about things. And one of the things that a lot of people did not really realize is that Steve liked bigger coupes. And what I mean by that is that he and I discussed his desire to get an i8. And so we probably talked about this for 6 months, every week. And he would tell me things and I would tell him things. And Steve bought himself an i8 5 days before he got sick. And so unfortunately he didn't really get to enjoy it, but he finally was able to realize that dream. But you know, Steve was just a unique individual, a true enthusiast that loved his cars. You can go through BMWs and you can look at just about every marquee, and there are, every model, and there are marquee owners. For example, Yale had his 2002. Blue Max had his E9 Coupe. Of course, Elvis had his 507. And I think that a lot of us realize and place Steve's 860 right up there in that group. It's a wonderful car. Yes, it's got some miles on it, but Steve maintained that car immaculately. And whoever gets that car has to realize that they are not just buying an 860. They are buying one of the wonderful marquees of the E31 8 Series. And I hope and wish that the new owner all the best of luck.
He was driving somewhere, and I guess the whole engine seized, and traumatic situation, and so his only option was to rebuild the engine. And in typical Steve Cohen fashion, he went for it. And I'm not an expert on engines, but I can tell you this, it has a beautiful sound when that car starts, and when you're driving it, it really does, it comes alive the longer you're on the road. So let's say you're out driving for about an hour, you really do just feel this, something about the car, it hums and it's beautiful, and it's like, you know, and again, I'm not a car person at all, but it's like, this is what it feels like to be in a true, driving machine.
Steve Cohen. Steve and I met in 2003 at the Left Coast 8 Fest, and again, many times at Russian River Wine Barrel tasting tours, where I spent time at his home and enjoyed a glass of Old Pashoro before we went to bed. Steve was a true gentleman who spared no expense on his one-owner 860. I fondly remember 3 days spent in his garage, replacing the heater core in July in Santa Rosa. It was bloody hot. I recall the time he took me out for a drive in his 860 on the road up to his house. Scared the crap out of me. Steve loved his 8, and it wasn't a garage queen as noted by the mileage. It was driven and enjoyed. This is a special car, once owned by a very special man, a father of 8 Fest and a member of the exclusive 8 Fest Hall of Fame. I can only hope that the new owner treats the 860 the way Steve did, with love. Buffer out.
Wow, I'm so excited today. I'm in Steve Cohen's legendary 860. After we spoke to Tammy earlier, had her interview, I got the chance to drive legendary Steve Cohen's 860, which is a 6-liter V12 board 850 from 5.8 to 6 liter. What's most legendary about this car is not the car itself, but the owner, Steve Cohen, who in the E31 world is known as the father and the godfather of the 8 Fest. Somebody who has passionately pursued getting all the E31 members and around the world actually to unite under one roof, get them to come to these Russian River gatherings in Santa Rosa, California over the years. But basically, I feel very honored today to be given the chance to be representing this car, and on top of it to be selling it for the family, help it go to a new custodian, new owner, which I hopefully will get to interview as well, because it doesn't get any more legendary than this. Steve is the original owner of this 6-speed 860. He had it for 30 years before he passed away. The car has 314,759 miles as I drive it now, but it does not feel like a car with that much mileage at all. It feels like a 40,000 mile car. It is so well kept and well cared for. People know me nowadays as the E31 guy, but long before I came around, there was Steve Cohen who was promoting these cars alongside a few other well-known people in the E31 community. It's my true honor and pleasure to be doing this today. And Steve, this is for you. I'm driving your 860, wherever you are up there looking down at us.
He's known as the Godfather of the 8 Fest. I learned that. I love that his legacy continues on. Now I'm going to get emotional. This has really been such a hard decision to let go of this car. Part of me, thank you, Alec. Thank you. Part of me feels incredibly guilty letting go of the car, because I know it was his gift to me. But I don't treasure it the way it should be treasured. I actually get really kind of nervous and stressed out about the car, because I know what my dad's expectations are. And I can't drive it to work because it just wouldn't be economical or even safe to have it in the neighborhood where my office is, downtown Los Angeles. We pull it out on the weekends. He really was a great custodian of the car. When I had to help him pack up his house shortly before he passed away, he gave me binders and binders of documentation, every single receipt over the years of how he took care of the car. Hopefully I'll find someone that can take care of it for at least another 30 years. Hopefully it'll be on the road for eternity.